I'll pay you $10,000 to leave my daughter alone, the powerful CEO sneered, but when the poor single dad only smiled, the truth he carried shattered the entire family's world. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The early morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of Miller's Auto Repair, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Daniel Miller wiped his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a small smudge of grease that matched the stains on his well-worn coveralls. The familiar scent of motor oil and metal hung in the air as he tightened the last bolt on Mrs. Thompson's old pickup truck. "Almost done, sweetie," he called out to Hope, who sat cross-legged in the corner of the shop, her small table covered with crayons and coloring books. "Okay, Daddy." Hope's cheerful voice echoed through the garage. She carefully colored within the lines of her princess picture, her tongue poking out in concentration. Daniel grabbed a clean rag from his workbench and methodically wiped the grease from his hands. The morning had been productive, 3 oil changes, and now Mrs. Thompson's transmission repair. He glanced at the clock on the wall. 11:30 a.m. "Ready for lunch, Hope?" he asked, walking over to the mini fridge tucked in the corner. He pulled out their shared peanut butter sandwich, cut diagonally just the way Hope liked it. "Yes." Hope bounced up from her seat, her dark curls bobbing with excitement. "Can we eat at Mary's Diner today? Please, Daddy?" Daniel smiled, looking down at their simple sandwich. They usually ate at the shop to save money, but today had been good. Mrs. Thompson had paid in advance. "You know what? That's a great idea. Let me just finish up here." Hope clapped her hands and began gathering her crayons, humming a tune she'd learned at school. Daniel watched her with quiet pride, amazed at how she could find joy in the smallest things. After locking up the shop, they crossed the street hand in hand. The bell above Mary's Diner door chimed as they entered, and the familiar smell of coffee and fresh-baked pie welcomed them. The lunch crowd was just starting to trickle in, and they found their usual booth by the window. "Well, if it isn't my favorite customers?" Mary herself came over, her gray hair tucked neatly under her hairnet. "The usual, Daniel?" "Yes, ma'am. Coffee for me, and chocolate milk," Hope chimed in, beaming. Mary winked at Hope. "Coming right up, sugar." The diner's peaceful atmosphere shattered moments later when the door burst open. Charles Whitmore stood in the entrance, his expensive suit and commanding presence drawing every eye in the room. His face was tight with barely contained anger as he scanned the diner, finally fixing his gaze on Daniel. The CEO strode purposefully toward their booth, each step echoing against the suddenly silent floor. Hope shrunk closer to Daniel's side, sensing the tension in the air. "Mr. Miller." Charles's voice was cold and clipped as he reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a check and laid it on the table with deliberate precision. $10,000. "Take it and stay away from my daughter." Daniel looked at the check, then up at Charles's stern face. The diner had gone completely still. Even Mary stood frozen behind the counter, coffee pot suspended in mid-pour. "It's okay, Hope," Daniel said softly to his daughter, who was clutching his arm. He gave her a reassuring smile before turning back to Charles. With gentle movements, he picked up the check and studied it for a moment. "Mr. Whitmore." Daniel's voice was calm and steady, despite the tension crackling in the air. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." He slid the check back across the table with the same careful precision Charles had used to place it there. "I'm not dating your daughter, sir." Charles's expression flickered with confusion, his carefully constructed anger momentarily derailed. "But you've been seen with Lily multiple times." "My sources." "Your sources are right about one thing," Daniel interrupted softly. "I do see Lily often, but only because she's Hope's teacher. They've become quite close." Hope nodded enthusiastically, seemingly encouraged by her father's calm demeanor. "Miss Whitmore is the best teacher ever. She lets me help water the class, plants, and everything." Charles stood very still, his face working through a series of expressions as he processed this information. The diner remained hushed, every patron pretending not to watch while hanging on every word. "You mean to tell me?" Charles began, his authoritative tone wavering slightly. "That's right," Daniel confirmed, his voice still gentle but firm. "The only relationship between Lily and me is that of a teacher and a parent. Nothing more." A faint flush crept up Charles's neck as he looked down at the check still lying on the table between them. The mighty CEO suddenly seemed smaller, less imposing. Daniel's smile never wavered as he met Charles's gaze. "I appreciate your concern for your daughter, Mr. Whitmore. She's an excellent teacher who's made a real difference in Hope's life. But I assure you, there's nothing inappropriate going on." The tension in the diner began to dissolve, replaced by a different kind of awkwardness. Mary finally remembered to pour the coffee she'd been holding, and the soft clink of cups and murmurs of conversation gradually resumed. Charles cleared his throat, clearly struggling to maintain his composure in the face of his mistake. He reached for the check, his movements stiff with embarrassment. Daniel's simple dignity and quiet strength had completely dismantled Charles's accusations without a hint of anger or defensiveness. The diner remained hushed, the regular patrons watching in amazement as the powerful CEO stood momentarily speechless before the humble mechanic. The check lay between them on the worn Formica table, a symbol of misunderstanding and hasty judgment that had been defeated by simple truth and gentle wisdom. The tension in Mary's diner hung thick in the air like summer humidity. Charles Whitmore still stood awkwardly by the booth, his face flushed with embarrassment from his mistaken accusations. Daniel sat calmly, his hands folded on the table, while the other customers pretended not to stare. The bell above the door chimed again, its cheerful ring cutting through the uncomfortable silence. Hope bounced in, her dark curls swaying with each step, clutching a piece of paper covered in crayon drawings. She'd been so excited about her artwork that she'd run back to the shop to get it from her coloring table. "Daddy, look what I made!" She waved the paper proudly, but then stopped short when she noticed the new faces in the diner. Her eyes grew wide as she recognized someone. "Miss Whitmore!" Lily stood near the counter, having entered moments before through the side door. She wore a simple sundress, her golden hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, looking every bit the elementary school teacher she was. She managed a small wave at Hope, though her smile seemed strained. "Hi, sweetheart," Lily said softly, her voice carrying across the now silent diner. Hope clutched her drawing to her chest and looked between Lily and Charles, her small brow furrowing in confusion. "Mr. Whitmore, are you Miss Whitmore's daddy?" she asked innocently. Charles cleared his throat. "Yes, I am," Hope nodded, processing this information with childlike seriousness. Then her face lit up as she remembered something. She turned to Lily, her eyes shining with pure trust and joy. "Miss Whitmore," Hope said, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a whisper but carried clearly through the hushed diner. "Mommy says you're my daddy." The words fell like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through the room. Someone's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. Mary, behind the counter, pressed a hand to her mouth. Lily's face drained of all color. She gripped the nearest chair for support, her knuckles turning white. Her eyes, wide with panic, darted between Hope and Daniel. Charles went rigid, his previous embarrassment forgotten as he turned to stare at his daughter. What is she talking about? His voice was dangerously quiet. Daniel sat perfectly still, his mind racing to make sense of Hope's words. He looked at his daughter, this precious child he'd raised alone since she was born, this little girl who'd never known her mother. Something cold and heavy settled in his stomach as pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed began to fall into place. Hope, oblivious to the impact of her words, pulled out a chair and climbed up to show Lily her drawing. "Look, I drew our family. There's Daddy and me, and you're here too." She pointed to the crayon figures with pride. Lily's hands trembled as she stared at the childish artwork. A tear rolled down her cheek, falling onto the paper and making a small dark spot among the bright colors. "Sarah," Lily whispered, so quietly, almost no one heard. But Daniel did. Sarah, Hope's mother's name. He'd only known her briefly, never understood why she'd left their newborn daughter with him and disappeared. Now, looking at Lily's face, he began to understand there was so much more to the story. The diner had become absolutely silent, like a theater during the most dramatic scene of a play. Every eye was fixed on the tableau before them, the confused child, the shaking teacher, the thunderstruck CEO, and the mechanic whose quiet life had just been turned upside down. Charles took a step toward his daughter. "Lily," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Explain this, now." But Lily couldn't seem to find her voice. She kept staring at Hope, at the drawing, at the innocent face that suddenly looked so familiar. Her sister's face, Sarah's face. I can't." Lily's words came out choked. She stumbled backward, bumping into a table. Water glasses wobbled, but didn't fall. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Hope's smile finally faltered as she sensed the adult's distress. Her lower lip trembled slightly. "Did I say something wrong?" Daniel moved instantly, his paternal instincts overriding his own shock. He slid out of the booth and scooped Hope into his arms, cradling her close. She buried her face in his neck, seeking the comfort she'd always found there. "No, sweetie," he murmured into her hair, his voice steady despite the earthquake happening in his world. You didn't do anything wrong. Everything's okay. But Lily was already moving, her heels clicking rapidly across the linoleum floor as she fled toward the door. Her face was ash white, tears streaming freely now. The bell jangled harshly as she pushed through, leaving behind a wake of questions and revelations that would change all their lives forever. It's all right, baby girl, Daniel whispered to Hope, who clung to him tighter. He could feel her small body trembling slightly, confused and frightened by the tension she didn't understand. Daddy's got you. Daddy's always got you. The evening wrapped around Daniel's small house like a gentle blanket. Crickets chirped their nightly songs outside the open window, and a cool breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming jasmine through the living room. On their worn brown sofa, the soft fabric threadbare in places from years of love and use, Daniel held Hope close against his chest. Her small body felt warm and precious, her breathing growing steady as sleep began to claim her. He gazed down at his daughter's peaceful face, her dark lashes resting against her cheeks and her mouth curved in a slight smile. Even after the chaos of the day, she looked completely at peace, trusting in her father's arms. Daniel's heart swelled with a familiar mixture of love and protectiveness. The events at the diner played through his mind like a movie he couldn't stop. The shock on everyone's faces, the pain in Lily's eyes, the way Charles Whitmore's anger had crumbled into confusion. But most of all, he remembered Hope's innocent words that had changed everything. Mommy says you're my daddy. His thoughts drifted back to that rainy night 3 years ago. Sarah, Lily's sister, had shown up at his door, soaked to the bone, with 3-year-old Hope bundled in her arms. Her face had been pale, her eyes haunted with something he couldn't quite understand at the time. Daniel, she had whispered, her voice breaking, I need you to take care of her, please. You're the only one I trust. The memory was so vivid, the sound of rain hammering against the roof, the way Sarah's hands shook as she passed Hope to him, the confused whimpers of the little girl who didn't understand what was happening. I promise, he had said without hesitation. I'll protect her with everything I have. Sarah had pressed a tear-stained envelope into his hands. Give this to her when she's older, when she asks about me. Then she had kissed Hope's forehead one last time and disappeared into the night. 2 weeks later, they found Sarah's car at the bottom of Miller's Creek. The doctor said it was an accident. The roads had been slick with rain, the curve too sharp. But Daniel had always wondered if there was more to the story, more weight behind Sarah's desperate eyes that final night. Hope stirred slightly in his arms, her small fingers clutching his worn t-shirt. Daddy, she murmured in her sleep, and Daniel felt his eyes grow wet. He had kept his promise to Sarah. Every day since then, he had poured his heart into giving Hope the best life he could manage. Their home might be modest, the paint peeling in places, the furniture well used, but it was filled with love and laughter. The walls were covered with Hope's artwork, bright crayon masterpieces that told stories of happiness and security. The envelope Sarah had left sat in his dresser drawer, unopened. He hadn't been able to bring himself to read it, respecting that it was meant for Hope, but now, with Lily's appearance in their lives, everything felt different. That envelope might hold answers that Lily needed too, answers about her sister's choices, about the secrets that had torn their family apart. Daniel remembered how Lily used to visit the shop sometimes, bringing Hope little treats or art supplies. He had seen the sadness in her eyes when she looked at Hope, but he never understood why until today. How much pain had she carried, not knowing her sister's secrets? How many questions had haunted her since Sarah's death? Hope's breathing deepened as she finally drifted into full sleep. Daniel carefully adjusted her position, making sure she was comfortable. Her dark curls, so like Sarah's, spilled across his arm. In sleep, the resemblance to her mother was even stronger, but there was something of Lily there too. Something in the gentle curve of her cheek, the shape of her nose. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. He had always known this day would come, the day when Hope would start asking questions about her mother, about her family. He just hadn't expected it to happen like this. Hadn't prepared for the collision of past and present in Mary's diner. Through the window, stars twinkled in the clear night sky. Daniel remembered how Sarah used to talk about the stars, telling Hope they were like little windows where angels peeked through to watch over them. Hope still believed that, often waving to the stars before bedtime. Daniel closed his eyes, his prayer rising silent but earnest in the quiet room. Lord, give me wisdom, he whispered. Show me how to handle this with grace. Help me protect Hope's heart while honoring the truth she deserves to know. Daddy, Hope murmured again in her sleep, snuggling closer. The simple word filled his heart with renewed purpose. Whatever came next, whatever truths the envelope held, whatever challenges the Whitmores might bring, his priority remained unchanged. He would continue to love Hope with everything he had, to provide her with the stability and security she needed. And maybe, just maybe, there was room in their little family for healing, for new connections, for answers to long-buried questions. The crickets continued their symphony outside, and the jasmine breeze danced through the room, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow. Daniel held his sleeping daughter close, grateful for the quiet moment to gather his strength for whatever the coming days might bring. Morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Lily's modern apartment, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. She paced back and forth, her bare feet silent against the expensive wood, her silk robe swishing with each turn. The city sprawled below her 20th floor view, but she barely noticed it today. "Mommy says you're my daddy." Hope's innocent words echoed in her mind, over and over, like a record stuck on repeat. Lily's hands trembled as she pushed her dark hair away from her face. How could Sarah have kept this secret? Her own sister, gone now for almost 2 years, had taken this truth to her grave. The sharp buzz of the intercom made her jump. She knew who it would be before the doorman's voice came through. "Miss Whitmore, your father is here." "Send him up, James," she managed to say, her voice shakier than she'd intended. Moments later, Charles Whitmore burst through her door like a thundercloud. His usually immaculate silver hair was slightly disheveled, and his expensive suit couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. "Lily, we need to talk about this mess right now." "Daddy, please!" Lily started, but Charles cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. "How long have you known about this?" His voice carried that familiar edge of authority, the same tone he used in board meetings when demanding explanations. "Did Sarah tell you before she left us?" Lily stopped her pacing and faced her father. "I knew nothing," she said, her voice cracking. "Nothing at all. Sarah never said a word about having a child. How could she keep something this huge from us?" Charles's face reddened. "That mechanic must be lying. There's no way." "Daniel," Lily corrected him firmly. "His name is Daniel, Dad, and you saw Hope yourself. She looks exactly like Sarah did at that age. Those same eyes, that same smile." Tears welled up in her eyes. Charles deflated slightly, sinking onto Lily's pristine white couch. For a moment, he looked older than his 60 years. "I should have known," he muttered. "Should have seen the signs when Sarah started pulling away." "We all missed it," Lily said softly, sitting beside him. "She was so good at hiding things. Remember when she was 16 and managed to keep that fender bender secret for 3 months? A ghost of a smile crossed Charles's face, but it quickly faded. "I failed her," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I was so focused on the company, on maintaining our image, our legacy. When she started rebelling, He trailed off, staring at his hands. Lily touched his arm gently. "Dad, you did the best you could after Mom died. We were all struggling." "But I pushed her away," Charles admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "When she dropped out of college, I gave her that ultimatum. Either fall in line with my plans, or—" He shook his head. "No wonder she never told us about Hope." Lily stood up again, walking to the window. The city stretched out before her, but all she could see was Hope's face, those innocent eyes looking up at her with such trust. "That little girl has been living just across town all this time?" she whispered. "My niece, Sarah's daughter. And we never knew." "We can't trust this Daniel person," Charles said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "He could be after the family money." "Did you see how he pushed away your check?" Lily turned to face her father. "He didn't even hesitate. And the way he held Hope, how he protected her when everything erupted." She wrapped her arms around herself. "He's been raising her alone all this time, Dad, doing what Sarah couldn't or wouldn't do." Charles was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against his knee. "What do you want to do about this, Lily?" "I need to see her again," Lily said firmly. "I need to understand. There must be more to this story. Letters, photos, something. Sarah wouldn't just—" She swallowed hard. "I don't care what it costs me. I have to know my niece." "Lily, think about this carefully," Charles warned, standing up. "Once you open this door—" "It's already open, Dad," Lily interrupted. She walked to her desk and picked up a framed photo of herself and Sarah as teenagers, their arms around each other, both laughing at some forgotten joke. "Sarah made sure of that when she told Hope about me. I just don't understand why she did it this way." Charles moved to stand beside her, looking down at the photograph. His expression softened as he studied the faces of his daughters, one now gone, one standing beside him, carrying the weight of unexpected truth. Hope looks so much like her, Lily whispered, touching Sarah's face in the photo. She has that same sparkle in her eyes, that same way of just saying what's in her heart. She set the photo down with determination. I won't walk away from her, Dad. I can't. Even if it means dealing with that mech with Daniel? Charles asked, catching himself. Especially then, Lily said. He's the one who's been there for Hope all along. He's the one who knows who my sister became after she left us. She turned to face her father fully. I need to understand, Dad. I need to know why Sarah chose this path. And most of all, I need to know my niece. Charles studied her face for a long moment, seeing the same determination that had made him such a successful businessman reflected in his daughter's eyes. Finally, he nodded slowly. Then we'll face this together, he said quietly. Whatever it costs. Lily felt tears sliding down her cheeks as she hugged her father, feeling his strong arms around her just like when she was a little girl. Thank you, Daddy, she whispered. But even as she stood in her father's embrace, Lily's mind was already racing ahead, planning how to approach Daniel, how to begin building a bridge to hope, how to uncover the truth her sister had left behind. No matter what obstacles lay ahead, she knew with absolute certainty that she had to try. The afternoon sun cast warm shadows across the elementary school's brick walls as parents gathered near the entrance. Daniel stood apart from the crowd, his work clothes still bearing traces of motor oil despite his best efforts to clean up. His heart raced as he spotted Lily's sleek car pulling into the parking lot. She emerged wearing a simple sundress, looking nothing like the CEO's daughter he'd expected. Her shoulders tensed as she approached, but before either adult could speak, the school doors burst open and children flooded out. Lily! Hope's voice rang clear above the chaos. She sprinted past other parents, her backpack bouncing, dark curls flying behind her. Without hesitation, she launched herself into Lily's arm. Lily caught her, stumbling slightly before steadying herself. Her eyes widened at Hope's immediate trust, and tears threatened to spill over. Hi, sweetheart, she managed, her voice thick with emotion. Daniel watched, his throat tight. Hope had never taken to anyone so quickly, not since. He pushed the thought away, focusing on his daughter's radiant smile. Can we go to the park? Hope asked, looking between Lily and her father. Please, Daddy, Lily can push me on the swings. Daniel met Lily's uncertain gaze. If Lily has time, he said carefully. I'd love to, Lily answered softly. They walked to the nearby park, Hope skipping between them, chattering about her day. She held both their hands, creating a bridge neither adult had expected. Daniel noticed how Lily listened intently to every word, asking questions about Hope's favorite subjects and friends. At the playground, Hope made a beeline for the swings. Higher, Lily, she squealed as Lily pushed her. I want to touch the clouds. Daniel settled onto a nearby bench, watching them. Lily's genuine laugh mixed with Hope's giggles, the sound easing some of the tension in his shoulders. After a while, Hope ran off to join some classmates on the jungle gym. Lily hesitated before sitting beside Daniel, leaving careful space between them. She's amazing, Lily said, her eyes following Hope. So full of joy. Daniel nodded. She makes it easy to keep going, even on the hardest days. Sarah, Lily's voice caught. My sister, she never told me about Hope, about you. I keep wondering how I missed it. She didn't want anyone to know, Daniel said quietly. She was scared of disappointing your family. Lily's hands twisted in her lap. We weren't close those last few years. I was always traveling, focused on my art career, teaching now. It feels like making up for lost time somehow. Hope mentioned you teach at her school, Daniel said. She loves your art class. She has natural talent, Lily smiled. Last week she drew this beautiful family portrait. She trailed off, realizing the weight of those words. They sat in silence for a moment, watching Hope climb and laugh with her friend. I know this is complicated, Lily finally said, but I'd like to be part of her life if you'll let me. Not to disrupt anything, just to know her, to be whatever she needs me to be. Daniel studied his hands, calloused from years of mechanical work. I've always told her the truth about Sarah. Age, appropriate versions, but the truth. That her mother loved her but couldn't stay. That sometimes people have battles they can't win. And now? Lily asked softly. Now. Daniel watched Hope wave at them from the top of the slide. Now, I think she deserves to know her family. All of it. Even the complicated parts. Hope ran back to them, cheeks flushed with exercise. Can Lily come have dinner with us sometime, Daddy? I want to show her my room and my books and my special rock collection. Daniel glanced at Lily, who looked both hopeful and uncertain. We'll figure something out, sweetheart, he said. The sun began to sink behind the trees, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Other families gradually left the park until they were almost alone. We should head home, Daniel said gently. It's almost dinner time. Hope's face fell, but Lily knelt down to her level. I'll see you again soon, I promise. Maybe we can read some stories together next time? Really? Hope's whole face lit up. She threw her arms around Lily's neck. Promise? Promise? Promise. Promise, Lily whispered, holding her close for a moment. Daniel nodded slightly when Lily looked up at him questioningly. It wasn't just about his comfort anymore. Hope had already opened her heart, the way children do, with complete trust and love. He couldn't shield her from this truth, nor did he want to. As they gathered Hope's backpack and prepared to leave, Daniel saw something shift in Lily's expression. A mixture of gratitude and determination. This afternoon had changed something for all of them, laying the first stones of a path forward, however uncertain it might be. Thank you, Lily said quietly to Daniel as Hope skipped ahead toward the parking lot. For letting me be here today. Thank you for being here, he replied simply. Hope turned back, waving enthusiastically. Bye, Lily. See you soon. Lily waved back, her smile genuine despite the tears in her eyes. Daniel guided Hope toward their truck, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for now, this moment of connection was enough. The kitchen in Daniel's modest home filled with the familiar aroma of tomato sauce and garlic. He stirred the pot of spaghetti, watching Hope at the small dining table as she colored with intense focus, her dark curls falling over her eyes. The simple meal wasn't fancy, but it was one of Hope's favorites. And then Lily showed me how to make a butterfly with paper, Hope exclaimed, not looking up from her drawing. She folds it just like magic, Daddy. Can she teach me more tomorrow? Daniel's wooden spoon paused mid-stir. Well, sweetheart, we'll have to see. Lily might be busy. But she's my mommy now, Hope said matter-of-factly, reaching for a blue crayon. That's what Sarah said her new mommy does. Teaches her things and picks her up from school sometimes. Daniel's chest tightened. He drained the pasta carefully, steam rising around his face. Hope, honey, remember what we talked about? About being careful with people's feelings? But Lily likes me, Hope insisted, her crayon moving in determined strokes across the paper. And she looks just like the lady in the picture, the one you said was my first mommy. Daniel set the pot down harder than he meant to, making Hope jump slightly. I'm sorry, sweetie, he said softly. You're right. Lily does look like your first mommy. They were sisters. Is that why she feels like my mommy? Hope asked, her innocent eyes meeting his. Daniel pulled out a chair and sat beside her, his work-roughened hands gentle as he brushed her curls back. Sometimes families are complicated, Hope, but what matters is that we love each other, right? Hope nodded, leaning against his arm. Like you love me forever and ever? That's right, princess. He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. The doorbell rang, startling them both. Daniel wasn't expecting anyone this late. Stay here and keep coloring, okay? He told Hope, moving cautiously to the front door. Through the window, he saw Charles Whitmore's imposing figure on his small porch. The CEO's expensive suit looked out of place against the worn welcome mat and faded paint. Daniel took a deep breath and opened the door. Mr. Whitmore, he said evenly. This is unexpected. Charles's steel-gray eyes fixed on him with uncomfortable intensity. May I come in? Daniel hesitated, then stepped aside. Hope's in the kitchen. I'd prefer if we could talk quietly. Charles nodded curtly, following Daniel to the living room. The furniture was well-worn but clean, family photos lining the walls. Charles studied them, his expression unreadable. I'll be direct, Charles said, his voice low but sharp. My daughter has been through enough pain. I won't stand by and watch her heart break again. Daniel met his gaze steadily. I have no intention of hurting Lily, Mr. Whitmore, or Hope. Intentions aren't enough. Charles stepped closer, his presence filling the small room. I've watched Lily cry too many times over her sister's choices. Now she's opening her heart to that little girl, to you, and I need to know where this leads. With all due respect, Daniel said quietly, I'm trying to figure that out myself. Hope is my whole world. Everything I do is to protect her. And what about Lily? Charles's eyes narrowed. She has a right to know her niece, to be part of Hope's life. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion seeping into his bones. I know that. I've been thinking about it all day, seeing them together at the park. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Hope needs good people in her life. And Lily, she has a gentleness about her that reminds me of Hope's mother before things got hard. Charles's stance softened slightly, but his voice remained steel. Listen carefully, Miller. If you're playing some game, if you hurt my daughter or that child, I will crush you, not with money this time. I will use every resource I have to make sure you never see Hope again. Are we clear? Daniel felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. Crystal clear. But you should listen carefully too, Mr. Whitmore. I've raised Hope alone since she was born. I've worked 18-hour days, learned to braid hair, kissed scraped knees, and chased away nightmares. No amount of money or power will ever make me give up on her. Daddy! Hope's small voice came from the kitchen. The timer beeped! Coming, sweetheart, Daniel called back, then turned to Charles. You're welcome to join us for dinner. It's just spaghetti, but there's plenty. Charles shook his head, already moving toward the door. Just remember what I said. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. And Miller, the garage on 5th Street is for sale. Better location than your current shop. Think about it. Before Daniel could respond, Charles was gone. Daniel stood for a moment, processing the threat and the odd olive branch that followed it. Then Hope called again, and he pushed it aside, returning to the kitchen where his daughter waited. Later that night, after Hope was bathed and in her favorite unicorn pajamas, Daniel knelt beside her bed for their nightly prayers. Hope's small hands were clasped together, her eyes squeezed shut in concentration. Dear God, she whispered, thank you for Daddy and spaghetti and Lily and drawing pictures. And please help Daddy not look so worried all the time. Daniel's throat tightened as he added his own silent prayer. The weight of Charles's words, Hope's innocent trust, and Lily's uncertain place in their lives pressed heavy on his heart. He knew the real battle wasn't with Charles's threats or even the complications of family ties. It was with his own fears and the fierce need to protect the precious life God had entrusted to him. Amen, Hope murmured sleepily. Amen, Daniel echoed, tucking the blanket around her shoulders and kissing her forehead. He stayed there a moment longer, watching her drift off to sleep, asking God for the wisdom to navigate the challenging days ahead. The afternoon sun beat down on Daniel's auto shop, casting long shadows through the open garage door. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a slight smudge of grease as he finished up work on Mrs. Henderson's ancient pickup truck. The familiar sounds of tools clinking and the radio playing softly filled the workspace. Hope sat at her usual spot in the corner, a small desk Daniel had built himself, complete with her art supplies and a few cherished books. She hummed along to the music, her legs swinging beneath her chair as she worked on yet another masterpiece. The distinct purr of a luxury engine approached, sputtering slightly before coming to an abrupt stop right outside. Daniel recognized the sleek silver Mercedes immediately. Charles Whitmore's car. His heart skipped a beat, but he kept his composure as he heard quick, irritated footsteps approaching. Of all the places for this to happen, Charles muttered, his polished shoes clicking against the concrete floor. He stood there in his tailored suit, looking distinctly out of place among the tools and grease-stained equipment. Mr. Whitmore, Daniel said evenly, wiping his hands on a clean shop rag. Having car trouble? Charles's jaw tightened. Obviously, the engine started making this noise, and then it just died. I have an important meeting in 30 minutes. Mind if I take a look? Daniel asked, already moving toward the Mercedes. He kept his voice professional and calm, despite the tension hanging in the air. Hope, honey, he called over his shoulder. Can you bring me my diagnostic tool from the red toolbox? Hope bounced up from her chair, pigtails swinging. Yes, Daddy. She skipped to the toolbox, carefully selected the correct tool, and brought it over. As she passed Charles, she gave him a bright smile. Hi, Mr. Lily's daddy? Charles's stern expression flickered for a moment, caught off guard by her innocent greeting. Hello, Hope, he replied, his voice softer than before. Daniel popped the hood and began his inspection, his experienced hands moving with practiced efficiency. Charles hovered nearby, checking his expensive watch every few minutes. Ah, here's your problem, Daniel said after a short while. The serpentine belt's loose. It's a quick fix. Shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. Fine, Charles said curtly. Whatever it costs, just bill it to my office. Daniel was already reaching for his tools. No need for that. It's a simple adjustment, hardly worth charging for. Charles's eyebrows shot up. Excuse me? It's not a major repair, Daniel explained, his focus on the engine. Just needs tightening. Anyone would do the same. Hope had wandered back over, clutching a drawing in her hands. Daddy always helps people, she announced proudly to Charles. He says fixing things is like giving hugs to broken hearts. Daniel felt his cheeks warm at his daughter's words, but he kept working, carefully adjusting the belt tension. Charles stood there, clearly unsure how to respond. He watched Daniel work with growing curiosity, noting the mechanic's steady hands and careful attention to detail. My daddy fixed Mrs. Peterson's car last week when she couldn't pay, Hope continued, warming to her subject. And he fixed Mr. Johnson's wheelchair ramp, and he helps at the church too. Hope, Daniel said gently. Mr. Whitmore probably doesn't want to hear all that. But Charles was looking at them both with an odd expression. No, it's interesting. He cleared his throat. You do all that extra work for free? Daniel straightened up, closing the hood with a soft click. Community matters, Mr. Whitmore. Money isn't everything. He met Charles's eyes steadily. Your car's ready. You should make your meeting on time. Charles reached for his wallet, but Daniel held up a hand. Like I said, it was a simple fix. No charge. I insist, Charles said, his voice carrying a note of frustration. And I respectfully decline, Daniel replied firmly. If you really want to do something, maybe consider donating to the church's food bank. They're always short on supplies. Hope tugged on Charles's sleeve, holding up her drawing. Look, I drew you and Lily and Daddy and me. The crayon figures stood holding hands under a bright yellow sun, surrounded by hearts. Charles took the drawing, something in his expression shifting as he studied it. The hard lines around his mouth softened slightly. You can keep it, Hope said generously. Daddy says sharing makes hearts bigger. Daniel started the Mercedes, and the engine purred perfectly. All set, Mr. Whitmore. Charles carefully folded the drawing and tucked it into his jacket pocket. He stood there for a moment, looking at Daniel as if seeing him for the first time. Without another word, he got into his car and drove away, but his usual air of superiority seemed diminished somehow. Hope waved enthusiastically as the Mercedes disappeared down the street. He looked sad, Daddy, but not as sad as before. Daniel lifted his daughter up, holding her close. Sometimes people just need time to understand things. Sweetheart. He kissed her forehead, leaving a tiny grease mark that made her giggle. Through the open garage door, they could see Charles's car stopped at the intersection. It sat there longer than necessary, even though no other cars were coming. When it finally turned the corner, it moved more slowly than usual, as if its driver was lost in thought. The rain tapped steadily against the windows of Daniel's small house, creating a gentle rhythm in the quiet evening. He had just finished helping Hope with her homework when a soft knock at the door caught their attention. Through the rain-streaked glass, he could make out Lily's familiar silhouette, holding something in her arms. Lily, Hope exclaimed as Daniel opened the door, her small feet pattering across the wooden floor. Lily stood there, her hair slightly damp from the rain, clutching a worn cardboard box. Her eyes held a mix of uncertainty and determination. I found these, she said softly, in an old storage unit. They were Sarah's. Daniel's breath caught at the mention of Hope's mother. He stepped aside, gesturing for Lily to come in from the rain. The box looked heavy with memories. Would you like some tea? He offered, noticing how Lily's hands trembled slightly as she set the box down on their small coffee table. Yes, please, she answered, kneeling beside the box while Hope watched with curious eyes. In the kitchen, Daniel filled the kettle, his movements deliberate as he processed what this moment might mean. When he returned with 2 steaming mugs, Lily had already opened the box, revealing stacks of envelopes, notebooks, and photographs. What's all that? Hope asked, peering into the box. These are things that belong to my sister, Lily explained, her voice gentle. Your first mommy. Hope settled onto the worn couch between them, her presence somehow making the heavy moment lighter. Daniel handed Lily her tea, and she smiled gratefully. I haven't looked through everything yet, Lily admitted. I thought we should do this together. Daniel nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Together, they began sorting through the contents. Photos spilled out, Sarah as a teenager, her smile bright and carefree, letters bound with faded ribbon, old birthday cards and ticket stubs. Look, Lily whispered, pulling out an envelope addressed simply to Hope. Her hand shook as she opened it. Would you like me to read it? Daniel offered. Seeing her struggle, Lily handed him the letter, and he began to read aloud. My dearest Hope, I wish I could be there to see you grow up, to see your first steps, hear your first words, watch you become the amazing person I know you'll be. But sometimes life doesn't give us what we want. It gives us what we need. And you, my sweet girl, need more than I can give you right now. Your daddy is the strongest, kindest person I've ever known. He'll give you everything I couldn't, stability, safety, and so much love. I was so scared when I found out about you, but he never wavered. Not once. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. Hope leaned against him, her small hand finding his. Lily pulled out another letter, this one addressed to her. Dear Lily, she read, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry I've been such a coward. You deserved better than a sister who ran away from everything. I couldn't face Dad's disappointment or your success, but mostly, I couldn't face myself. Tears rolled down Lily's cheeks as she continued reading. I want you to know Hope. She's pure and beautiful, everything I couldn't be. Daniel will raise her right. He's good like that. Maybe someday, when you find out about her, you can be part of her life too. She deserves to know her aunt, to have a piece of me that isn't broken. The rain continued its steady rhythm outside as they worked through the box. Each letter revealed more of Sarah's story, her struggles, her fears, but most importantly, her deep love for Hope and her trust in Daniel. One letter detailed her final wishes. I want Hope to grow up knowing love, real love, not the kind that comes with conditions or expectations. Daniel knows how to give that kind of love. I've seen it in the way he looks at her, even now. Please, let her be raised with that love. Hope, who had been quietly listening, reached into the box and pulled out a dried flower pressed between two pieces of paper. Was this Mommy Sarah's? She asked. Yes, Lily answered, wiping her eyes. She used to collect flowers everywhere she went. Said they were little pieces of happiness she could keep forever. Daniel watched as Lily showed Hope how to carefully handle the delicate flower. The walls between them seemed to crumble with each shared memory. Each revealed truth. Did Mommy Sarah write any happy letters? Hope asked, snuggling between them on the couch. I'm sure there are some, Lily replied, looking at Daniel with understanding in her tear-brightened eyes. Can we read those tomorrow? Hope asked hopefully, looking between them both. Lily brushed away fresh tears, managing a warm smile. I'd like that very much. The Sunday afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of Mason's diner, casting warm rectangles of light across the checkered floor. Daniel guided Hope to their usual booth, his hand gentle on her shoulder, while Lily followed with a soft smile. The familiar scent of fresh-baked pie and coffee filled the air. Can I have cherry pie, Daddy? Hope asked, bouncing slightly in her seat. Her blue dress, the one she insisted on wearing for their Sunday outings, matched her bright eyes. Of course, sweetheart, Daniel replied, catching Lily's amused glance across the table. These Sunday afternoon pie dates had become their little tradition over the past few weeks. Martha, the elderly waitress who had worked at Mason's for over 30 years, approached their table with her well-worn notepad. Well, if it isn't my favorite family, let me guess, cherry pie for the little princess? Hope beamed, nodding enthusiastically. And chocolate milk. I'll have apple, please, Lily said, smoothing her napkin across her lap. She'd grown comfortable here, despite the stark contrast between Mason's humble interior and the upscale restaurants she'd grown up frequenting. Just coffee for me, Martha, Daniel added. Daddy, you have to have pie too, Hope protested, her lower lip jutting out. It's Sunday, Daniel chuckled, raising his hands in surrender. All right. Pecan, please, Martha. The diner hummed with the usual Sunday crowd, families fresh from church, elderly couples sharing quiet conversations, teenagers huddled in corner booths. Daniel noticed several friendly nods from regulars who had grown used to seeing them together. As Martha walked away, the bell above the door chimed. Theodore Bradford, one of the wealthiest real estate developers in town, strode in with his wife, Margaret. Daniel had done work on their cars before, though Theodore always dealt with him through his assistant. The Bradfords settled into a nearby booth, Margaret's jewelry catching the sunlight. Daniel could feel their stares, but he focused on Hope, who was telling an animated story about her friend's new puppy. I just don't understand it. Theodore's voice carried clearly across the diner, deliberately loud enough to be heard. A Whitmore, sitting with, well, it must be some sort of charity case. Charles must be beside himself. The diner grew quiet. Daniel's hands tightened slightly around his coffee cup, but his expression remained calm. Hope, too young to understand, continued coloring on her placemat. Lily's cheeks flushed red. She straightened in her seat, her eyes flashing. Excuse me, Mr. Bradford, she said, her voice clear and steady, but I'd appreciate it if you'd keep your prejudiced comments to yourself. Theodore's eyebrows shot up. My dear, I'm only concerned about your reputation. Surely you understand that some associations are beneath your family standing. Daniel placed his hand gently on Lily's arm as she started to rise, but she shook her head. No, Daniel, this needs to be said. She turned to face Theodore directly. Mr. Bradford, the man you're calling a charity case has more integrity in his little finger than most people have in their entire body. He works harder than anyone I know, raises his daughter with more love and wisdom than I've ever seen, and treats everyone, even those who look down on him, with dignity and respect. The diner had gone completely silent. Martha stood by the counter, coffee pot frozen, mid-pour. Hope looked up from her coloring, her crayon suspended above the paper. Furthermore, Lily continued, her voice growing stronger, if you're so concerned about my family's standing, you should know that my father has come to respect Daniel deeply. And I'm proud, yes, proud to be sitting here with him and Hope. Daniel's expression remained serene, though his eyes shone with quiet appreciation. When Theodore opened his mouth to respond, Daniel spoke softly but clearly. Mr. Bradford, you're welcome to your opinion, but I'd appreciate it if we could all enjoy our Sunday pie in peace. Hope has been looking forward to it all week. The simple dignity in his response seemed to deflate Theodore's indignation. Several other patrons nodded approvingly. Martha appeared with their pie, setting the plates down with extra flourish and shooting Theodore a disapproving look. Thank you, Martha, Daniel said warmly, as if nothing unusual had happened. Hope, honey, remember to use your napkin. A few minutes later, the Bradfords quietly asked for their check and left, leaving their untouched coffee behind. As the door closed behind them, several regular customers caught Daniel's eye, offering small smiles and nods of support. Hope, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly clapped her hands together, her face lighting up. See, Mommy? Daddy's brave. Lily reached across the table and squeezed Daniel's hand, no longer caring who saw. Yes, sweetheart, your daddy is very brave. The rest of the diner returned to its normal Sunday afternoon rhythm. The clink of forks against plates, the murmur of conversation, the hiss of the coffee machine. But something had shifted, like a picture finally hanging straight after being crooked for so long. Daniel cut into his pecan pie, sharing a piece with Hope when she asked to taste it. His quiet strength filled the space between them, more powerful than any harsh words could ever be. Lily watched them both, feeling for the first time that she was exactly where she belonged, proud to be sitting with this humble man who had taught her more about dignity than all her years of private education ever had. Martha refilled their coffee cups, adding an extra dollop of whipped cream to Hope's chocolate milk with a wink. On the house today, she said firmly, patting Daniel's shoulder as she passed. Golden leaves danced on the autumn breeze as music and laughter filled the town square. Colorful banners stretched between lampposts, and the sweet scent of caramel apples mingled with fresh popcorn. The annual Harvest Festival had transformed their small town into a magical wonderland of twinkling lights and joy. Daniel held Hope's small hand as they walked past rows of game booths, her eyes wide with wonder at every new sight. She wore her favorite purple sweater, her dark curls bouncing with each excited step. "Daddy, look at all the teddy bears!" she exclaimed, pointing to a ring-toss booth where plush animals hung in neat rows. A few steps behind them, Lily and Charles followed somewhat awkwardly. Charles tugged at his expensive tie, clearly out of his element among the casual festival crowds. Lily touched his arm gently. "Dad, maybe lose the tie? This is supposed to be fun." "I always wear a tie," Charles muttered, but after a moment's hesitation, he loosened it and slipped it into his pocket. Lily smiled, recognizing even this small concession as progress. "Ring toss? Can we try, Daddy?" Hope bounced on her toes, pulling Daniel toward the booth. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and Daniel couldn't help but grin. "Sure, sweetheart. Would you like to join us?" He glanced back at Lily and Charles, his invitation genuine and warm. Lily stepped forward immediately. "I'd love to." She knelt beside Hope, who beamed at her. "Which teddy bear do you like best?" "The purple one." Hope pointed to a lavender bear wearing a tiny bow tie. Charles hung back, watching with an unreadable expression as Daniel paid for 3 sets of rings. Daniel handed Hope her rings first, showing her how to hold them. "Like this, honey, nice and steady." His hands were gentle as he guided her small fingers. Hope's first throw went wide, but she giggled instead of getting frustrated. "Oops, that one wanted to go swimming instead." Lily tried next, her ring clanking against a bottle before falling away. "Harder than it looks," she admitted with a laugh. Charles cleared his throat. "The angle of trajectory is important." Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. He shifted uncomfortably, then stepped forward. "May I?" He held out his hand for a ring. Daniel passed him one, and to everyone's amazement, Charles's throw landed perfectly around a bottleneck. Hope clapped her hands in delight. "Grandpa, you did it!" The word "grandpa" seemed to freeze Charles in place. His eyes grew suspiciously bright, and he quickly pretended to adjust his collar. Working together, they managed to win the purple bear for Hope. As she hugged it tight, the booth operator smiled and said, "Great teamwork. You folks should try for the family challenge at the Apple booth. Winners get their photo in the town paper." Hope's eyes lit up. "Can we? Please?" Daniel looked uncertainly at Charles and Lily, but before he could speak, Charles surprised them all. "Well, we can't disappoint Hope, can we?" The Apple Booth Challenge involved working as a team to peel the longest continuous apple peel. Charles rolled up his expensive shirt sleeves without hesitation. Daniel steadied the apple. Lily handled the knife with careful precision, and Charles kept track of the delicate peel as it grew longer and longer. Hope played her part too, cheering them on and warning them when the peel was about to break. "And we have our winners," the booth operator announced, measuring their peel against the day's record. Cameras flashed as they posed together. Hope in the middle, holding her bear and beaming, Daniel and Lily on either side of her, and Charles standing behind them all, his hands resting lightly on Hope's shoulders. For just a moment, they looked exactly like what they were becoming, a family. Afterward, they shared fresh caramel apples at a picnic table. Hope's face was sticky with caramel, and even Charles had loosened up enough to laugh when some apple juice dribbled down his chin. Daniel quietly passed him a napkin, and Charles nodded in thanks. The gesture, simple but meaningful. As evening settled in, the festival lights began to twinkle on. Hope convinced them all to try the face painting booth, and soon she sported butterfly wings on her cheeks, while Lily had a small star near her eye. Daniel allowed Hope to choose a red heart for his cheek, and Charles, after much persuading from his granddaughter, accepted a tiny crown on his hand where he could easily hide it with his sleeve. "Look!" Hope pointed to where couples were dancing to soft music in the town square. Strings of fairy lights crisscrossed overhead, creating a canopy of stars. "It's so pretty!" Charles cleared his throat. "Hope, would you like to dance with your grandfather?" The words seemed to cost him something, but his smile was genuine. Hope's face lit up. "Yes, please." She took his hand, and Charles led her to the edge of the dancing area, carefully showing her how to stand on his shoes so he could walk her through the steps. Daniel and Lily found themselves standing alone beneath the twinkling lights. The music played softly, and the autumn air carried the scent of apples and warmth. When Daniel turned to say something light, the words died in his throat. Lily was already looking at him, her face soft in the golden glow of the festival lights. The star painted near her eye seemed to shimmer, and something unspoken passed between them. A moment of perfect understanding, of shared joy in the family they were slowly building. The moment stretched, delicate as a soap bubble, full of possibility. Lily's lips parted as if to speak, and Daniel found himself leaning slightly forward, drawn by the warmth in her eyes. "Daddy, Mommy, come dance too!" Hope's voice broke through the spell as she tugged at their hands. The moment dissolved, but the warmth remained as they let their little girl pull them into the dance, her laughter rising like music into the starlit sky. The night air carried the sweet scent of cotton candy and popcorn as Daniel, Lily, and Hope walked home from the festival. Tiny lights twinkled above them, strung between lampposts like fallen stars. Hope skipped ahead, her prized teddy bear clutched tight, while Daniel and Lily followed at a slower pace. "Look, Daddy, the stars are dancing," Hope called out, twirling beneath the festival lights. Her laughter echoed through the quiet street. Daniel smiled, watching his daughter spin. "Careful there, sweetheart. Don't get too dizzy." "I won't," Hope promised, but stumbled anyway, giggling as she caught herself. Lily reached out to steady the little girl. "Maybe your teddy bear would like to rest a bit? You've been carrying him all evening." "His name is Charlie," Hope announced. "Like Grandpa Charles." She hugged the bear tighter, making both adults exchange surprised glances at her casual use of the word grandpa. They walked in comfortable silence for a moment, their footsteps falling into an easy rhythm. The festival sounds faded behind them, replaced by crickets and the soft rustle of autumn leaves. "She has so much joy," Lily said softly. "You've done an amazing job with her, Daniel." Daniel ducked his head, humble as always. "Some days I wonder if I'm doing enough. Being both mom and dad, it's not easy." "Tell me about it," Lily asked gently. "The hard parts, I mean. The real stuff." Daniel took a deep breath, watching Hope dance ahead with her bear. "The nights are the hardest. When she has bad dreams, or gets sick." Those moments when a little girl just needs her mother. He paused, his voice growing quieter. I do my best, but sometimes I feel like I'm just stumbling through it all. Lily touched his arm lightly. But you keep going. That's what matters. Your turn, Daniel said, looking at her with kind eyes. What's been hardest for you in all this? Hope had stopped to examine a particularly interesting leaf, giving them a moment of semi-privacy. Lily wrapped her arms around herself, gathering courage. Growing up, I was always Sarah's sister, she admitted. The quiet one, the responsible one. When she left, I thought maybe finally I'd find my own path, but her shadow stayed. And now, she gestured helplessly. Now I'm learning about this huge part of her life that I never knew about, and I feel like I failed her somehow. Failed Hope. You didn't fail anyone, Daniel said firmly. You're here now. That's what counts. Hope ran back to them, leaves crunching under her feet. Mommy, will you read me a bedtime story tonight? Lily's breath caught at the word mommy. She knelt down to Hope's level. Sweetie, I have to go home tonight, but maybe another time? Hope's face fell slightly, but she nodded bravely. Promise? I promise, Lily said, her heart squeezing. They reached the corner where their paths would split. Hope hugged Lily's legs tight. Love you, Mommy. Lily's eyes filled with tears as she hugged Hope back. Love you too, sweet girl. Daniel scooped Hope up, settling her on his hip. Say goodnight to Lily. Night, night. Hope waved her teddy bear's paw. I'll walk you home, Daniel offered. But Lily shook her head. My car's just around the corner. But thank you. She hesitated, then added, Thank you for everything today, for letting me be part of this. Daniel's eyes softened. You're not just part of this, Lily. You're family now. The word family hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. Lily found herself taking a step closer, drawn by the warmth in Daniel's gaze. Daddy, Hope Stage whispered, is Mommy going to give you a goodnight kiss? Daniel blushed, and Lily let out a surprised laugh. The moment broke, but the warmth remained. Good night, Daniel, Lily said softly. Good night, Hope. She turned and walked toward her car, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Behind her, she heard Hope's voice. Daddy, your face is all red. Lily smiled to herself as she reached her car. For the first time since learning about Hope, she felt like maybe everything would work out. Maybe there was room in this little family for her after all. Daniel and Hope headed up their street, the little girl already half asleep on her father's shoulder. The night felt full of possibility, like a new chapter was just beginning. As they approached their modest house, Daniel noticed a dark figure standing on his front porch. The peaceful glow of the evening shattered as they approached Daniel's modest house. A tall figure emerged from the shadows near the front porch, making Hope grip Daniel's hand tighter. Under the yellow porch light, the man's face twisted into a cruel smile. Well, well, quite the cozy little family we have here, the stranger drawled, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Hope. Daniel instinctively stepped in front of his daughter. Can I help you? Name's Marcus Reed, the man said, pulling out a cigarette, and that's my kid you're holding on to. Lily gasped, her face draining of color. She knew that name, her sister's ex-boyfriend, the man who'd abandoned them both years ago. You need to leave, Daniel said quietly but firmly, his jaw tightening. Marcus lit his cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating his weathered face. Not happening. See, I've been doing some research. Found out my ex's kid is now connected to the mighty Whitmore family. He blew smoke in their direction. Funny how things work out, right? Hope buried her face in Daniel's leg, trembling. Lily moved closer to them, forming a protective wall. You have no right. Lily's voice shook with anger. You left them. You weren't there when my sister needed you. Marcus laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the night air. Rights? Sweetheart, I've got more rights than your mechanic friend here. I'm her biological father. Blood counts for something in court. Daniel's heart pounded, but his voice remained steady. Hope is my daughter. I've raised her since she was born. For now? Marcus sneered, pulling out a crumpled envelope from his jacket. My lawyers drew up some paperwork. Seems I've got a pretty good case for custody, especially considering your limited means. His eyes traveled dismissively over Daniel's worn work clothes. Lily stepped forward, her hands clenched into fists. You're doing this for money. You don't care about Hope at all. Maybe. Marcus shrugged. But a judge might see things differently. Rich grandfather, successful aunt, much better environment for a kid than a grease monkey's garage, don't you think? Hope whimpered, and Daniel lifted her into his arms, holding her close. She pressed her face into his neck, her small body shaking. "Daddy," she whispered, "I'm scared." Marcus's face hardened. "Better get her used to calling someone else that." He flicked his cigarette onto Daniel's lawn. "My lawyers will be in touch. Hope to see you soon, Princess." He directed the last words at Hope, who only clung tighter to Daniel. As Marcus walked away, disappearing into the darkness, Lily pulled out her phone with trembling hands. "I'm calling my father. We need help." Daniel barely heard her. The world had shrunk to the weight of his daughter in his arms, the precious warmth he'd protected for 6 years. For the first time since that terrible night when Hope's mother had left her with him, real fear gripped his heart. Inside the house, Hope wouldn't let go of him. She sat in his lap while Lily paced, talking rapidly to Charles on the phone. Daniel could hear the CEO's angry voice through the speaker, promising lawyers and protection. "It's okay, sweetheart," Daniel murmured to Hope, running a gentle hand over her hair. "Everything's going to be okay." But his voice caught on the words. Lily ended the call and knelt beside them. "Dad's already calling our attorneys. We won't let this happen, Daniel. We won't let him take her." Hope lifted her tear-stained face. "Is the bad man going to take me away?" "No, baby," Daniel said firmly, though his heart ached with uncertainty. "You're my daughter. Nothing will ever change that. Promise?" Hope's lower lip trembled. Daniel pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I promise to fight for you with everything I have." Lily reached out and squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with tears. "We'll fight together, all of us." Later that night, after Lily reluctantly left and Hope finally fell asleep, Daniel couldn't bring himself to put her in her own bed. He sat in the old rocking chair in her room, holding her close, watching the shadows play across her peaceful face. His mind raced with terrible possibilities. Marcus had money now, or at least the promise of it. He could afford good lawyers. What if a judge looked at Daniel's humble life and decided Hope deserved better? What if his love wasn't enough? Hope stirred in her sleep, mumbling "Daddy" as she snuggled closer. Daniel's arms tightened around her, and for the first time in years, he felt tears slip down his cheeks. The fear in his chest was a physical thing, heavy and cold. "Lord," he whispered into the darkness, his voice breaking, "please don't let them take my baby girl." The night stretched long before him as he held his daughter, each tick of the clock bringing them closer to a battle he wasn't sure he could win. Outside, the stars continued their silent vigil over the small house where a father's love faced its greatest test. The same porch light that had revealed Marcus's threats now cast a dim glow through Hope's window, a reminder that darkness had found their doorstep. Daniel rocked gently, his daughter secure in his arms for now, praying that tomorrow would bring the strength to face whatever came next. Morning sunlight streamed through the dusty windows of the law office as Daniel shifted uncomfortably in the hard wooden chair. The worn leather of his work boots contrasted sharply with the polished floor. His calloused hands twisted nervously in his lap while he waited for the lawyer to finish reviewing his documents. Attorney Sarah Martinez adjusted her reading glasses, scanning the paperwork spread across her desk. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Daniel had scraped together every penny he could find for this consultation, emptying Hope's piggy bank and even selling his prized collection of vintage car parts. "Mr. Miller," Sarah began gently, "I understand your situation. The adoption papers are solid, but biological parents can sometimes challenge." The office door swung open, making them both jump. Lily burst in, followed by her father Charles, who looked unusually disheveled despite his expensive suit. "I'm sorry we're late," Lily said breathlessly, pulling up a chair beside Daniel. "Traffic was terrible." She reached over and squeezed Daniel's arm reassuringly. Charles remained standing, his presence filling the small office. "Miss Martinez, I trust you understand the gravity of this situation. Money is no object when it comes to protecting my—" He hesitated, glancing at Daniel. "My granddaughter." Daniel's shoulders tensed. "Mr. Whitmore, I appreciate the help, but I can't accept—" "Nonsense," Charles cut in, his voice softer than usual. "This isn't charity, Daniel. This is about hope." The lawyer cleared her throat. "Having additional resources will certainly help, but we need to be prepared. Mark Stevens, Hope's biological father, has already filed preliminary paperwork. His claim centers on never having officially terminated his parental rights." Daniel's stomach churned. He abandoned them both before Hope was even born. "Her mother gave me full custody before she—" His voice cracked slightly. Lily leaned forward, her eyes bright with tears. "My sister would never have wanted him near Hope. She told me herself how." She stopped, collecting herself. "I have her letters now. They prove everything." Sarah nodded, making notes. Those letters could be valuable evidence, but Mr. Stevens is claiming your family's wealth as a motivation. He's suggesting Miss Miller has been influenced by potential financial gain. That's ridiculous, Lily exclaimed. Daniel wouldn't even take my father's money when he offered it. Charles shifted uncomfortably, remembering that day in the diner. I can testify to that myself. Daniel has shown nothing but integrity. The lawyer's expression remained serious. Character witnesses will help, but we need to prepare for a difficult battle. Mr. Stevens has hired aggressive representation. They'll try to paint this as a class issue, wealthy family trying to buy a child versus biological father's rights. Daniel stood up suddenly, pacing the small office. This isn't about money. It's never been about money. Hope is my daughter in every way that matters. I've been there for every skinned knee, every nightmare, every bedtime story. Lily rose and touched his arm, stopping his nervous movement. We know, Daniel. We'll fight this together. Charles cleared his throat. Miss Martinez, I have considerable influence in this town. Perhaps if I spoke to Judge Wilson. Dad, no. Lily turned to face him. That's exactly what Mark wants to prove. We're trying to use money and power to win. We have to do this right. The lawyer nodded approvingly. Your daughter is correct, Mr. Whitmore. Any appearance of manipulation could damage our case severely. Charles sank into a chair, looking defeated. Then what do you suggest? We build a case based on truth, Sarah replied. We show Hope's stable life with Mr. Miller, document the abandonment, present the mother's letters and wishes. We demonstrate that Hope's best interests lie in maintaining her current family structure. Daniel returned to his seat, his voice quiet but firm. I won't let him hurt her. Hope doesn't even know him. She'd be terrified if strangers tried to take her away. Speaking of Hope, Lily interjected, checking her watch, I should pick her up from school. She'll be waiting. Go, Daniel said softly. She needs her routine to stay normal through all this. After Lily left, they spent another hour discussing strategy and paperwork. When the consultation ended, Charles insisted on covering the legal fees, but Daniel firmly shook his head. Please, Daniel said, let me handle what I can. I need to know I'm fighting for her myself. Charles studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're a good man, Daniel Miller. I was wrong about you. Later that evening, Daniel sat at his kitchen table, the setting sun casting long shadows across the worn linoleum. Hope's small hand was clasped in his as she knelt on her chair, head bowed in prayer. Dear God, she began in her clear, sweet voice, please help our family stay together, and help Daddy not look so worried, and help Mommy Lily smile more, and help Grandpa Charles remember to laugh sometimes. Daniel squeezed her hand gently, his heart both heavy and full. And thank you for making us a family, Hope continued. Even if some people don't understand, we know love makes a family, right, Daddy? That's right, sweetheart, Daniel whispered, drawing strength from her simple faith. Love makes a family. The courtroom's polished wooden benches creaked as people settled in for the custody hearing. Daniel sat at the defendant's table, his Sunday suit slightly worn at the cuffs. Despite his best efforts to press it, the fabric couldn't hide its age. Beside him, Sarah Martinez arranged papers with quiet efficiency, but Daniel could see the tension in her movements. Across the aisle, Mark Stevens lounged in his chair, whispering to his expensive attorney. His designer suit and gold watch caught the fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to Daniel's modest appearance. The man's smirk made Daniel's stomach churn. Hope was safely at school, protected from this moment. Daniel touched the small photo of her he kept in his pocket, drawing strength from her smile. Lily sat directly behind him, close enough that he could hear her steady breathing. Charles occupied the bench beside her, his usual commanding presence subdued by the gravity of the situation. Judge Wilson entered, her black robe sweeping behind her as everyone rose. After the initial proceedings, Mark's lawyer stood, his voice filling the courtroom with practiced authority. Your Honor, my client is Hope's biological father. He has natural rights that supersede any temporary arrangement. Mr. Miller, while well-meaning, is simply a caretaker who has grown attached. Furthermore, with Mr. Stevens' improved circumstances and the Whitmore family's obvious interest, the child would benefit from— Objection, Your Honor, Sarah interrupted. Counsel is editorializing. Sustained, Judge Wilson replied. Please stick to facts, Mr. Bradford. The morning dragged on as Mark's team presented their case. They painted Daniel as an opportunist, suggesting he was using Hope to access the Whitmore fortune. Each insinuation felt like a physical blow, but Daniel maintained his composure, remembering Hope's words about being brave. When it was their turn, Sarah called their first witness, Mrs. Chen, the elderly owner of the corner grocery store, walked slowly to the stand. Her accent was thick but clear as she spoke. I know Daniel Miller 6 years now. Every winter, he checks my store's heater for free. Last year, big storm came. No power. My freezer broke. All food going bad. She smiled at Daniel. He fixed it at midnight. Wouldn't take money. Said, neighbors help neighbors, Mrs. Chen. Next came Tom Watson, a local school bus driver. 3 years ago, my truck died. Couldn't afford repairs. Needed it for my second job. Daniel fixed it after hours. Only charged for parts. Let me pay in installments too. That's just who he is. Sarah called witness after witness. The high school principal described how Daniel volunteered to teach auto shop classes. A young mother told how he'd changed her tire in the rain, then followed her home to make sure she arrived safely. The pastor spoke of Daniel's quiet contributions to the church's food bank. Robert Jones, a retired veteran, hobbled to the stand with his cane. Last winter, my furnace quit. Living on fixed income, couldn't afford repairs. Found out later, Daniel spent his own money on parts. Worked all weekend to fix it. Never said a word about payment. Each story painted a picture not of wealth or status, but of quiet integrity. Daniel felt overwhelmed by the outpouring of support, having never realized how many lives he'd touched in small ways. Then came Jimmy Torres, a 12-year-old boy who nervously approached the stand. His mother helped him adjust the microphone. Last year, some bigger kids were picking on me after school, Jimmy said softly. Mr. Miller saw from his shop. He came over, didn't yell or anything, just stood there and asked if everyone was okay. The bullies left. After that, he let me do homework in his shop when Mom was working late. Hope would share her cookies with me. Jimmy looked directly at the judge. She's lucky to have him as a dad. Maria Santiago, a single mother of 3, testified next. My car broke down right before Christmas. No money for repairs. Daniel not only fixed it, but somehow presents appeared on our doorstep Christmas morning. Hope's name was on the card, but I knew. She wiped tears away. That's the kind of father he is. The testimonies continued, each one revealing another facet of Daniel's character through simple acts of kindness. Even the diner's crusty old cook Bill came forward to describe how Daniel and Hope would bring him soup when he was sick. Mark Stevens grew increasingly agitated as the parade of witnesses continued. His lawyer objected several times, claiming the testimonies were irrelevant to the custody issue, but Judge Wilson overruled him. Character and community connections are relevant factors in determining the best interests of the child, she stated firmly. Finally, Officer Pete Davidson took the stand. The veteran police officer's uniform was crisp as he spoke. I've known Daniel Miller since he opened his shop. Never had a complaint about him. But what stands out is last summer, during that big heat wave, he turned his garage into a cooling station for elderly folks who didn't have air conditioning. Spent his own money on water and fans. Never asked for recognition. As the testimony phase concluded, Daniel sat quietly, humbled by the outpouring of support. He hadn't realized how many people had noticed his small acts of kindness over the years. To him, they had just been the right thing to do. Sarah stood for closing arguments, her voice strong and clear. Your Honor, we've heard today about the kind of man Daniel Miller is, not through grand gestures or financial statements, but through countless small acts of decency and compassion. This is the environment in which hope is being raised, one of genuine care for others, of quiet strength and consistent love. Mark's lawyer countered with arguments about biological rights and financial stability, but his words seemed hollow against the morning's testimonies. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Wilson reviewed her notes. Daniel held his breath, feeling the weight of hope's future in each passing second. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white with tension. Behind him, he could hear Lily's quiet prayers. The afternoon sun slanted through the high windows, casting long shadows across the courtroom floor. Daniel thought of Hope, probably finishing her last class of the day, unaware that her whole world hung in the balance. He closed his eyes, adding his own silent prayer to Lily's. Judge Wilson set down her papers and looked out across the hushed courtroom. The tension was palpable as everyone waited for her decision. The judge's gavel struck with a sharp crack that seemed to split Daniel's world in two. Until further evidence can be reviewed, I'm granting temporary visitation rights to the biological father, Judge Harrison announced, her voice echoing through the hushed courtroom. The child will spend tonight with him, supervised by a court-appointed guardian. Daniel's legs went weak. He gripped the wooden railing in front of him, his knuckles turning white. Hope, his precious Hope, clutched her stuffed rabbit closer to her chest as she looked up at him with frightened eyes. "Daddy?" Her small voice quivered. He knelt beside her, forcing a brave smile even as his heart shattered. "It's okay, sweetheart. Remember what we said about being brave?" His voice caught in his throat. "You're going to stay with someone else tonight, but I'll see you tomorrow." "I don't want to go," Hope whispered, tears welling up in her big brown eyes. "I want to stay with you." The court-appointed guardian, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, approached them gently. "It's time, dear." Daniel pulled Hope into a tight hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I love you so much, Hope. Be brave for Daddy, okay?" She nodded against his shoulder, her small arms wrapped around his neck. When the guardian finally led her away, Hope looked back over her shoulder, still clutching her rabbit. The sight of her tear-stained face was more than Daniel could bear. As the courtroom emptied, Daniel remained frozen in place. The polished wooden floor seemed to sway beneath his feet. His legs finally gave out, and he slumped onto the nearest bench, burying his face in his hands. "I failed her," he whispered, his shoulders shaking. "I promised to protect her, and I failed." Lily's gentle hand touched his shoulder. She sat beside him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. "You haven't failed anyone, Daniel. This is just temporary. We're going to fight this." "How?" His voice cracked. "He has money for fancy lawyers. He has biological rights. What do I have? Just a mechanic's salary and 6 years of love that apparently don't count for anything in the eyes of the law." Charles Whitmore, who had been standing silently nearby, stepped forward. His usual commanding presence seemed diminished, his face etched with an unfamiliar uncertainty. "I was wrong," he said quietly. Daniel and Lily both looked up, startled by the admission. "I thought money could solve everything," Charles continued, settling heavily onto the bench across from them. "I believe power and influence were the answers to life's problems. But watching you today, Daniel," he shook his head, "the way those townspeople spoke about you, the elderly woman whose car you fixed for free so she could visit her sick sister, the single mother whose children you watch when she works late shifts, the teenager you help stay in school by giving him a part-time job. That's just being decent," Daniel murmured. "No," Charles said firmly, "that's being extraordinary. And I realize now that throwing money at this situation isn't the answer. We need to fight this together as a family." Lily squeezed Daniel's hand. "Dad's right. You're not alone anymore, Daniel. Hope needs all of us." Daniel stared at the empty courtroom, remembering how small Hope had looked walking away. His chest felt hollow, knowing she wouldn't be in her bed tonight, wouldn't want her usual bedtime story, wouldn't whisper her nightly prayers with him. "I don't know if I can do this," he admitted, his voice barely audible. The thought of her scared and alone. "She's not alone," Lily assured him. "The guardian seemed kind, and Hope has her rabbit. She's stronger than you think, just like her daddy." Daniel stood up slowly, his legs still unsteady. I need to go home. I can't be here anymore." The drive home was a blur. Every street corner held memories of walks with Hope. Every store window reminded him of her excited pointing. Every playground echoed with the ghost of her laughter. When he finally reached his modest house, the silence inside was deafening. Hope's drawings still covered the refrigerator. Her favorite cereal box sat on the counter, half empty. Her shoes lay scattered by the door, small and innocent. Each sight was like a knife to his heart. The weight of everything finally crashed down on him. Daniel's legs gave out completely, and he collapsed beside his bed, his hands gripping the worn quilt Hope loved so much. Tears he'd been holding back all day broke free, running down his face as silent sobs racked his body. "Please," he whispered, slowly sinking to his knees. "Please, God, give me strength. I can't lose her. She's everything to me." His prayers came out broken and desperate. "Help me be strong enough. Help me find a way. Please, please, just keep her safe tonight." The evening light faded outside his window as Daniel remained there, on his knees, praying through his tears for the strength to face whatever came next. In the darkness of his empty house, without Hope's gentle breathing from the next room, he had never felt more alone, or more determined to fight for the daughter who had become his whole world. The morning sun filtered through the courthouse's tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. Daniel sat rigid in his chair, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had turned white. The night without Hope had been the longest of his life. Lily sat beside him, her usual elegant posture replaced by worried fidgeting. Even Charles, typically commanding in his tailored suit, looked drawn and tired in the row behind them. The biological father, Marcus Stevens, lounged on the other side with an air of smug confidence that made Daniel's stomach turn. When the bailiff called them to rise for Judge Harrison's entrance, Daniel's legs felt like lead. He forced himself to stand, scanning the room anxiously for any sign of hope the court-appointed guardian was supposed to bring her. "Be seated," Judge Harrison said, adjusting her glasses. "Before we proceed with today's testimonies, I understand Miss Hope Miller has arrived with her guardian. Please bring her in." The heavy wooden doors creaked open. Hope appeared, holding the guardian's hand. Her dark curls were slightly messy, and she wore the purple dress Lily had bought her last week. Daniel's heart clenched at the sight of her small face, searching the room. Then something unexpected happened. Hope's eyes landed on Daniel, and without hesitation, she broke free from the guardian's grip. "Daddy!" she cried out, running straight down the center aisle. Several people gasped, but Hope didn't slow down until she reached Daniel's side, grabbing his hand tightly. "Order!" Judge Harrison called, though her voice was gentler than usual. "Miss Miller, please come forward." Hope looked up at Daniel, who nodded encouragingly despite his racing heart. She walked to the front, still clutching his hand, pulling him along with her. "Hope," the judge said kindly, leaning forward slightly, "do you understand where you are?" "Yes, ma'am," Hope replied clearly. "This is where grown-ups decide things." A few soft chuckles rippled through the courtroom. Judge Harrison smiled. "That's right. And today, we're trying to decide what's best for you. Do you understand that?" Hope nodded solemnly. "Like when Daddy helps me pick the right coat for cold days?" "Something like that," the judge agreed. "You spent last night with Mr. Stevens. Can you tell me about that?" Hope's grip on Daniel's hand tightened. "He has a big TV," she said quietly, "and lots of toys. But," she trailed off, looking down at her shoes. "But what, sweetheart?" "But he didn't know how to do my bedtime prayer right," Hope continued, "or that I need my special cup with the purple flowers for milk. And he didn't check under the bed for monsters or sing the goodnight song." Marcus Stevens shifted in his seat, looking uncomfortable for the first time. "I see," the judge said. "And you ran to Mr. Miller just now. Can you tell me why you want to stay with him?" Hope's face brightened. She looked up at Daniel, then at Lily, who sat watching with tears in her eyes, and finally at Charles, who had leaned forward in his seat. "Love makes a family, right?" Hope said, her voice clear and innocent. "That's what Miss Turner taught us in Sunday school, and Daddy loves me most." She squeezed Daniel's hand. "He fixes cars and hearts, you know. And now we have Mommy Lily too, and Grandpa Charles, who pretends to be grumpy but gives the best hugs." The courtroom fell completely silent. Daniel felt tears burning in his eyes as Hope continued. "Daddy says love isn't about having lots of things. It's about being there, like when I'm scared or sick, or when I drew on the walls that one time, and he was mad but still loved me." Hope looked directly at the judge. "Mr. Stevens has a nice house, but Daddy has love, and that's better, right?" Judge Harrison removed her glasses, wiping them slowly with a cloth. When she put them back on, her eyes seemed mistier than before. "Yes, Hope, that's much better." Marcus Stevens stood up suddenly. "Your Honor, she's just a child. She doesn't understand." "Mr. Stevens," the judge cut him off firmly. "I believe she understands perfectly well." She turned back to Hope. "Thank you, sweetheart. You may go sit with your family now." Hope beamed at the word family. She tugged Daniel's hand, leading him back to where Lily. Saturday, without hesitation, she climbed into Lily's lap, reaching out to hold Daniel's hand again. The judge watched this scene unfold, her expression thoughtful. After a moment, she spoke. "Given the testimony we've heard, including Miss Miller's remarkably clear statement, I believe I have enough information to make my final decision." She paused, looking around the courtroom. "However, I want to take time to review all evidence thoroughly. Court is adjourned until tomorrow at 9 a.m., when I will deliver my ruling." The gavel struck once more, but this time it didn't sound quite so threatening to Daniel's ears. Hope remained curled in Lily's lap, one hand still holding his, the other reaching back to pat Charles's knee. Daniel looked at his daughter, this miracle, who had just spoken such profound truth through her simple, childlike wisdom. She smiled up at him, and in that moment, despite the uncertainty still hanging over them, he felt a glimmer of hope warm his heart. "Daddy," Hope whispered as people began filing out of the courtroom. "Can we have pancakes for dinner?" "With chocolate chips?" Lily asked, brushing Hope's curls back from her face. "And whipped cream?" Charles added gruffly from behind them. Hope giggled, nodding enthusiastically. "See?" she said to no one in particular. That's what family does. The courthouse buzzed with nervous energy as sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting warm patches across the worn wooden benches. Daniel's hands trembled beneath Lily's gentle grip, his shoulders tense despite Charles's steady presence beside him. The familiar scent of old books and furniture polish filled the air, but Daniel could barely breathe. Hope sat between her teachers from school, her small legs swinging as she clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit. She kept glancing at Daniel with those big, trusting eyes that made his heart ache. "All rise," the bailiff called out, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The Honorable Judge, Margaret Stevens, presiding." Everyone stood as the judge entered, her black robe sweeping behind her. She settled into her chair, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the papers before her. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. "Be seated," Judge Stevens said, her voice firm but kind. She looked around the courtroom, taking in every face before her gaze settled on Hope. "I have carefully considered all testimony and evidence in this case." Daniel felt Lily's hand tighten around his. On his other side, Charles had gone completely still, his usual commanding presence subdued by the weight of the moment. "The question before this court," the judge continued, "is not simply one of biological parentage, but of what serves the best interest of the child." She paused, looking directly at Hope's biological father, who sat with his expensive lawyer, a smug expression on his face. "Mr. James Thompson has asserted his biological rights, but rights come with responsibilities he has never assumed until now." The judge shuffled her papers, and Daniel's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Hope's biological father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "This court has heard testimony from numerous community members about Mr. Daniel Miller's character. We've heard from teachers, neighbors, and even local business owners. Each has painted a picture of a man who, despite limited means, has created a loving, stable home for his daughter." Tears pricked at Daniel's eyes as he remembered Miss Rodriguez, Hope's kindergarten teacher, describing how he never missed a parent-teacher conference. Mr. Johnson from the grocery store had testified about Daniel helping elderly customers carry their groceries, all while teaching Hope the importance of serving others. Furthermore, Judge Stevens continued, her voice growing firmer, "We have heard from Hope herself. While she is young, her words carried profound wisdom. Love makes a family," she said. "This court agrees." The judge removed her glasses, looking directly at Daniel. "Mr. Miller has demonstrated through years of dedicated parenting what it truly means to be a father. He has provided not just shelter and food, but emotional security, moral guidance, and unconditional love." Daniel felt Charles's hand rest on his shoulder, a gesture of support that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. In contrast, the judge's tone hardened slightly. "Mr. Thompson's sudden interest in custody appears motivated more by financial considerations than paternal concern. His absence during the first 6 years of Hope's life, combined with his failure to provide any support, speaks volumes." Hope's biological father's face darkened with anger, but he remained silent under his lawyer's warning glance. "Therefore," Judge Stevens straightened in her chair, "it is the ruling of this court that full custody of Hope Miller shall remain with her father, Daniel Miller." The relief that flooded through Daniel was so intense, he nearly collapsed. Lily caught him, tears streaming down her face as she wrapped her arms around him. Charles's grip on his shoulder tightened supportively. "Furthermore," the judge added, raising her voice over the quiet murmurs in the courtroom, "Mr. Thompson's petition for visitation rights is denied at this time. If he wishes to establish a relationship with Hope in the future, he may petition the court after demonstrating consistent interest in her welfare through appropriate channels." Hope's biological father shot up from his seat, face red with rage. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "That's my daughter." "Mr. Thompson," Judge Stevens' voice cracked like thunder, "control yourself or you will be held in contempt." The man grabbed his briefcase, shoving past his startled lawyer and storming toward the doors. They slammed behind him, the sound echoing through the suddenly quiet courtroom. "Daddy?" Hope's small voice drew everyone's attention. She had slipped away from her teachers and now stood in the aisle, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Come here, sweetheart." Daniel opened his arms, and Hope ran to him. He lifted her up, holding her close as she wrapped her small arms around his neck. The smell of her strawberry shampoo and the familiar weight of her in his arms made everything real. "Court is adjourned," Judge Stevens announced, but she was smiling as she gathered her papers. People began filing out of the courtroom, but Daniel stood rooted to the spot, still holding Hope. Lily pressed close, her hand gentle on Hope's back. Charles stood nearby, uncharacteristically quiet, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Let's get some fresh air," Lily suggested softly, leading them toward the courthouse steps. The spring sunshine felt like a blessing as they emerged from the building. Daniel couldn't contain his joy anymore. He lifted Hope high into the air, spinning her around as she giggled with delight. "We did it, baby girl," he cried, laughing and crying at the same time. "We're staying together, forever and ever?" Hope asked as he brought her back down for a hug. "Forever and ever," Daniel promised, his voice thick with emotion. Lily wrapped her arms around them both, and to everyone's surprise, Charles stepped forward to embrace them all. They stood there on the courthouse steps, holding each other. Their unlikely golden evening sunlight bathed Daniel's modest backyard in warm hues as the sweet aroma of grilled burgers and hot dogs wafted through the air. What was once a quiet space now buzzed with life and laughter. Wooden picnic tables, borrowed from neighbors, dotted the freshly mowed lawn, covered in checkered tablecloths that fluttered in the gentle breeze. Daniel stood at the grill, spatula in hand, watching Hope chase bubbles that Lily blew into the air. His heart swelled at their giggles, still amazed at how naturally Lily had become part of their lives. Charles sat nearby in a folding chair, his usual business suit replaced by casual khakis and a polo shirt, looking more relaxed than Daniel had ever seen him. "Need any help there, son?" Charles called out, rising from his seat. The word son still felt new, but it brought a warmth to Daniel's chest every time he heard it. "I think I've got it handled," Daniel replied with a smile, flipping another burger. "Though you might want to rescue those hot dogs before they get too crispy." Hope ran past them, her sundress twirling. "Grandpa Charles, watch me catch all the bubbles!" She jumped and spun, her small hands reaching for the iridescent spheres floating through the air. Charles chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I see you, sweetheart. You're doing a wonderful job." He turned to the gathered guests, neighbors, friends from church, and even some of Daniel's regular customers from the auto shop. "Everyone, if I could have your attention for a moment?" The casual chatter quieted as Charles cleared his throat. Daniel set down his spatula, curious about what the older man had to say. Lily moved closer, standing near Daniel with Hope now settled in her arms. "I owe all of you, but especially Daniel, an apology," Charles began, his voice carrying across the yard. "When I first came to this town, I thought I knew everything. I judged people by their bank accounts instead of their hearts." He paused, meeting Daniel's eyes. "I was wrong, and I'm not too proud to admit it anymore." Daniel felt Lily's hand slip into his as Charles continued. "This man here," Charles gestured to Daniel, "taught me what real wealth looks like. It's not in stock portfolios or business deals. It's in the way he loves his daughter. It's in how he treats everyone with respect, even when they don't deserve it." Charles's voice grew thick with emotion. "I couldn't have asked for a better man to be part of our family." Hope wiggled free from Lily's arms and ran to hug Charles's legs. "Does this mean we're all staying together forever?" she asked, looking up at him with those innocent eyes that could melt the hardest heart. Charles lifted her up, his smile gentle. "That's right, sweetheart. We're all family now." As the guests applauded, Daniel felt Lily squeeze his hand. He turned to find her eyes shining with tears and love. The setting sun painted her face in soft gold, making her more beautiful than ever. "Daniel," she whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "I need to tell you something." He nodded, leading her to the quiet corner of the yard where an old oak tree spread its branches. The same tree where Hope loved to play, where he'd spent countless hours pushing her on the tire swing. "These past months," Lily began, her voice trembling slightly, "watching you with Hope, seeing your strength through everything. I've fallen in love with you, Daniel Miller. Not just with how you love Hope, but with your quiet faith, your gentle heart, your unwavering integrity." Daniel's heart raced as he cupped her face in his hands. "Lily Whitmore, you've brought so much joy into our lives. Hope adores you, and I." He paused, gathering his courage. "I love you too, more than I ever thought possible." Their moment was interrupted by the patter of small feet as Hope ran up to them, wrapping her arms around their legs. "Are you saying I get to keep my mommy forever?" she asked, her face glowing with hope. Lily knelt down, pulling Hope into a tight hug. "Yes, sweetheart, if that's what you want." "I've been praying for this," Hope exclaimed. "Every night I ask God to make us a real family." The sun had nearly set now, and fireflies began to dance through the yard like tiny stars. The other guests had gathered around the tables, helping themselves to food and sharing stories. But this moment belonged to just the three of them. Hope snuggled between Daniel and Lily, watching the fireflies with wonder. Her small hand reached up to touch Daniel's cheek, turning his face toward hers. "See, Daddy?" she whispered, her eyes twinkling like the fireflies around them. "Mommy says you're my hero." Daniel smiled, holding both Hope and Lily close as the fireflies continued their gentle dance around them, the future suddenly brighter than he'd ever imagined it could be. Charles watched from a distance, his heart full as he saw his daughter, granddaughter, and the man he now proudly called son sharing this precious moment. The backyard filled with the warm glow of paper lanterns that neighbors had strung up, casting a soft light over the gathering of people who had become more than just a community. They had become family. The simple backyard now held more wealth than any boardroom Charles had ever commanded, filled with the richness of love, forgiveness, and new beginnings. As Hope's laughter rang out across the yard, Daniel knew that every struggle, every moment of doubt, had led to this perfect evening where love had truly made them whole. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Daniel Miller, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.